Intro, have you ever wondered how a single moment from the past can ripple through an entire lifetime? Tonight, we bring you the story of a man whose journey from arrogance to accountability will leave you questioning the true power of forgiveness and change. What happens when a billionaire confronts the people he wronged decades ago? And how does one woman's strength turn pain into purpose? Before we dive into this compelling story, we'd love for you to join our growing community by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you'll never miss another powerful story like this one, stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us all. So, grab a seat and stay with us until the end. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of this transformative tale. Billionaire attends reunion. With former classmate he bullied, but her strength changes everything. John McAllister leaned back in the leather chair of his penthouse office, his eyes scanning the elegant cream-colored envelope lying on the desk before him. The gold-embossed words, Lakewood High School 20-year reunion, shimmered under the soft light. He tapped a finger thoughtfully against his temple, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. A reunion, a chance to revisit the past, or rewrite it entirely. John had come a long way since his days at Lakewood High. He had been the charismatic golden boy then, star quarterback, prom king, and the center of every social circle. But those accolades had long since been overshadowed by his greater achievements. Now a billionaire, he had built an empire from scratch, commanding respect and envy in equal measure. This reunion, he thought, would be the perfect stage to remind everyone of his success. Yet as he flipped through the guest list included in the invitation, a familiar name caught his eye. Laura Hayes. John paused, the smile fading slightly. He hadn't thought about Laura in years. Memories began to surface. Her awkward frame, her large glasses, the way she always sat alone in the cafeteria. She had been an easy target for jokes, and John, in his cocky teenage arrogance, had often been the ringleader of those cruel taunts. Ugly duckling, they had called her. He couldn't remember exactly what he had said, but he remembered the laughter, and Laura's silence. Always silence. He shook off the pang of discomfort that nudged at his chest. That was a lifetime ago. People grow up, he rationalized, brushing the thought aside. If anything, this reunion might offer him the chance to show her and everyone else how far he had come. An idea began to form in his mind, growing bolder with each passing second. What if he invited Laura as his guest? He leaned forward, scanning her name again. The yearbook photo that flashed in his mind bore no resemblance to the suave women he now surrounded himself with. Yet something about the thought intrigued him. Was it curiosity, a desire to reconcile with the past, or perhaps, he admitted to himself, it was the dramatic appeal of the gesture? Bringing Laura Hayes to the reunion would cement his image as a magnanimous man, capable of extending kindness even to those society overlooked. John reached for his phone and dialed his assistant, Cynthia. She picked up on the second ring. "Mr. McAllister, how can I assist you? I need you to find someone for me," John said, keeping his tone casual. "A Laura Hayes. She's on the guest list for my high school reunion. Reach out and see if she'd like to attend. With me." There was a brief pause on the line. "Understood. Anything else?" "Send her an invitation," John added, a small smirk forming on his lips. "Make it clear she'll be attending as my personal guest." After hanging up, John swiveled his chair to face the sprawling cityscape outside his office window. His reflection stared back at him, polished and confident. He imagined the look on his former classmates' faces when he walked into the reunion with Laura Hayes on his arm. It was perfect, but somewhere deep in the recesses of his mind, a flicker of doubt lingered. What would Laura think of this invitation? Would she even remember him? For a moment, The thought of rejection crossed his mind, but he dismissed it as quickly as it came. People always wanted to be part of his world now. Why would Laura Hayes be any different? As the week progressed, John received confirmation that his assistant had successfully reached Laura and that she had accepted the invitation. The message was brief and professional. Ms. Hayes has confirmed her attendance. She will meet you. At the reunion venue, John stared at the message for a long moment, a strange sensation settling in his chest. Satisfaction? Triumph? He wasn't quite sure. He leaned back once more, picturing the reunion. The crowded gymnasium, the murmurs of admiration, the whispers as he walked in. It was all coming together just as he had envisioned. But as the days ticked by, another thought began to creep in, a thought he hadn't allowed himself to entertain before. What if Laura Hayes wasn't the same person he remembered? Who was Laura Hayes now, and how would she react to standing face to face with the man who once led the charge in making her high school years miserable? John McAllister adjusted his cufflinks as he waited in the elegant lounge of the Lexington Hotel. The space, adorned with crystal chandeliers and plush leather seating, exuded sophistication, much like himself. He glanced at his watch, a limited edition, Patek Philippe, and then at the grand entrance. Laura Hayes was supposed to meet him here before they attended the reunion together. John tapped his foot against the polished marble floor, a rare flicker of impatience surfacing. This wasn't like him. Meetings were his domain, his forte, whether they involved sealing multi-million-dollar deals or charming influential socialites. Yet there was something unsettling about this particular rendezvous. When the doors swung open, John's foot froze mid-tap. There she was. Laura Hayes walked in, and for a moment John wasn't sure he had the right person. Her presence was magnetic. Gone was the timid, awkward girl he remembered from high school. Instead, Laura carried herself with a calm, commanding grace. Her tailored navy dress hinted at quiet confidence, and her hair, now styled in elegant waves, framed a face that radiated intelligence and determination. John stood, recovering quickly from his surprise. "Laura," he greeted, offering his hand. "John," she replied, her voice steady and self-assured. She shook his hand briefly before taking the seat across from him. The small smile on her lips was polite. Nothing more. For a moment, neither spoke. John studied her, his thoughts racing. This was not the girl he remembered sitting hunched over a lunch tray, avoiding eye contact. This, Laura met his gaze directly, her posture relaxed, but with an air that demanded respect. "I have." "To admit," John began, breaking the silence, "when I saw your name on the guest list, I was curious. I didn't expect this." He gestured vaguely, hoping to cover the fact that he was still processing her transformation. "This?" Laura raised an eyebrow, her tone amused. "You've changed," he clarified, leaning back slightly. "Completely. Different from how I remember you." Laura tilted her head, studying him for a moment. "And how exactly do you remember me, John?" The question, though posed lightly, hit with precision. John hesitated. He'd spent years burying the specifics of his high school antics under layers of success and self-justification. "Well," he began, searching for neutral ground, "you were quiet." Laura's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "Quiet," she repeated, her tone making it clear she wasn't buying his attempt at diplomacy. John cleared his throat. "Look, high school was a long time ago. We've all changed, haven't we?" Laura leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "Some of us had to, John." The words hung between them, sharp but not unkind. John felt an unfamiliar unease creep over him. As their conversation continued, Laura revealed glimpses of her life after high school. She had earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, pursued a career in psychology, and eventually found Her calling as a motivational speaker, her work focused on empowering those who had been marginalized or silenced, helping them reclaim their voices. Motivational speaking, John repeated, intrigued despite himself. What inspired you to go down that path? Laura hesitated for a fraction of a second, then answered, my own experiences. Growing up in a place where I felt invisible, or worse, like a target, shaped how I see the world. I realized I couldn't change what happened to me, but I could use it to help others. Her words struck a chord, though John couldn't quite pinpoint why. He had expected her to bring up the past, to accuse or blame him, but she didn't. Instead, she spoke with a quiet resolve that made him feel both impressed and, for reasons he couldn't explain, uncomfortable. As their conversation drew to a close, John gestured to the waiting car outside. Shall we? The reunion won't wait forever. Laura rose gracefully, but before following him, she paused. John, she said, her tone calm but deliberate, I didn't accept your invitation because I wanted to reconnect. He turned, puzzled. Then why did you accept? To confront the past, she replied, her eyes meeting his, and to make sure it stays where it belongs. Her words left him momentarily speechless. As they stepped into the car, John couldn't shake the feeling that he had underestimated Laura Hayes, and that the evening ahead would be nothing like he had envisioned. As they head to the reunion, memories of their high school years resurface, bringing John closer to realizing the impact of his actions. Laura, meanwhile, braces herself for a confrontation she's been preparing for her entire adult life. The low hum of the car's engine filled the silence as John McAllister and Laura Hayes sat side by side, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. The reunion venue was still miles away, but to John, the atmosphere inside the car felt heavier with every passing minute. So, John began, attempting to lighten the mood, you excited to see everyone? It's been, 20 years? Feels like just yesterday, doesn't it? Laura turned her gaze from the window, her expression neutral. Not really, she replied, her tone even. Her lack of enthusiasm caught him off guard. Really? No. Curiosity? No nostalgia. Nostalgia for what? Laura asked, arching an eyebrow. High school wasn't exactly my glory days. John chuckled, though the sound came out forced. Come on, it couldn't have been that bad. Everyone has. Some good memories from high school. Laura's eyes met his, and for a moment the air between them seemed to still. Do you? He hesitated, sensing the undercurrent of meaning in her question. Well, sure, he said, opting for a casual tone. Football games, prom, hanging out with friends, the usual stuff. Laura nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. I imagine it must have been nice, being at the center of it all. John shifted in his seat, her words hitting closer than he expected. He decided to steer the conversation towards safer ground. So what about you? Surely there's something you look back on fondly. Laura let out a soft, mirthless laugh. Fondly? Let me think. She trailed off, her gaze returning to the passing lights outside the window. I suppose there was one thing. The library. It was quiet there. No one bothered me. No one... John frowned, the words stirring something he hadn't felt in years. No one bothered you? He repeated, though he already knew the answer. Laura turned back to him, her expression calm, but her voice edged with steel. You wouldn't understand, would you? You were too busy leading the charge. John felt a flicker of unease. He didn't like where this was heading. Look, Laura, if this is about... Back then I just want to say... You don't need to say anything, John, Laura interrupted, her voice firm but devoid of anger. I didn't accept your invitation to hear an apology. Then why did you accept? He asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Laura's lips pressed into a thin line. Because I wanted to face it. Face you. Her words left him momentarily speechless. John prided himself on his ability to control conversations, to lead them where he wanted. But with Laura, he felt as though the ground was constantly shifting beneath him. "Look," he began after a pause, his voice softening, "whatever happened back then, we were kids, stupid, immature kids. It wasn't personal." Laura's expression hardened, and for the first time that evening, there was a flicker of raw emotion in her voice. "Not personal? Tell me, John, when you called me ugly duckling in front of the entire cafeteria, was that not personal? When you laughed as your friends stuffed my locker with trash, was that not personal?" John opened his mouth to respond, but found no words. Laura took a deep breath, regaining her composure. "You say it wasn't personal because it didn't affect you, but for me, it was every day, every glance, every whisper, every laugh at my expense. It was all personal, and it wasn't just me." Her voice wavered slightly, and John noticed, her hands tightening around her purse. "My brother Michael," she continued, her tone quieter now, "he was always kind. Smart, thoughtful, too good for that place. But you and your friends didn't see that. You saw a target, someone you could push around, humiliate, just like me." John felt the air leave his lungs. He hadn't thought about Michael Hayes in years, but now the memories began to resurface. Michael's hunched shoulders, his quiet demeanor, the way he avoided eye contact in the hallways. "Laura, John began, but she raised a hand to stop him. "You don't need to say anything," she repeated, her voice steadier now. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty. I've moved past that. But I need you to understand something, John. Your actions, what you thought were harmless jokes, had consequences. For me, it meant years of feeling like I wasn't enough. For Michael—" Her voice broke slightly, but she pushed on. "For Michael, it meant losing hope. He took his own life a year after graduation." The words hit John like a physical blow. He stared at Laura, his mind racing but unable to form a coherent thought. "I never blamed you entirely," Laura said, her tone softening. "There were others, and Michael had his struggles. But you were part of it. You were the one who made it okay for everyone else to join in." John swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to defend himself, to explain that he hadn't known, that he had never intended for anything like this to happen. But deep down, he knew that wasn't enough. The car pulled up to the reunion venue, but neither of them moved to exit. The driver glanced at them through the rearview mirror, but John barely noticed. "I don't hate you, John," Laura said finally, breaking the silence. "I've spent too much of my life trying to let go of hate, but I need you to know the truth, and I need you to decide what you're going to do with it." Her words lingered as she opened the door and stepped out, leaving John alone in the car. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't ignore, shame and the crushing weight of accountability. As they enter the reunion, John struggles to process what he's learned. Memories of his past actions begin to clash with the persona he has built, forcing him to confront the truth of who he was and who he wants to be. The Lakewood High Gymnasium, transformed for the reunion, buzzed with energy as alumni greeted one another with laughter, handshakes, and the occasional exclamation of disbelief. Balloons in the school's signature blue and gold hovered near the ceiling, and a banner reading "Welcome Back Class of 2003" stretched across the room. The smell of catered hors d'oeuvres and nostalgia mingled in the air. John McAllister entered with Laura Hayes on his arm. The chatter softened as heads turned their way, curious whispers quickly filling the void. "Is that Laura Hayes?" someone murmured. "No way! She looks incredible!" John felt a flicker of pride at the attention, but the stiffness in Laura's posture reminded him this wasn't the triumphant entrance he had imagined. She walked beside him, poised and graceful, her expression unreadable. "Looks like we're the main event," John quipped softly. Laura glanced at him, her lips curving into a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Enjoy it while it lasts." As the evening unfolded, John found himself slipping into familiar patterns. He shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and regaled former classmates with tales of his business success. The conversations were easy, predictable, until they weren't. "You're here with Laura Hayes?" asked Greg Sanders, a former teammate from the football team. His tone was casual, but the underlying incredulity was unmistakable. John hesitated. "Yeah," he replied, keeping his voice light. "She's changed a lot." Greg nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Good for her. She had it rough back then, you remember, right?" John forced a chuckle, but the weight of Greg's words lingered. He excused himself, seeking a drink to steady his nerves. Laura, meanwhile, moved through the room with quiet confidence. People gravitated toward her, drawn not only by her transformation, but by her composed demeanor. As John watched her from across the room, he felt an unfamiliar mix of emotions: admiration, unease, and something he couldn't quite name. When the DJ announced an open microphone for anyone who wanted to share memories, Laura stepped forward. The room fell silent as she took the stage. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but being here has brought back a lot of memories. Some good, some not so good." A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. John tensed, unsure of what was coming next. "High school," Laura continued, "is often painted as the best years of our lives. But for some of us, it was a time of survival. I was quiet, awkward, an easy target, and for a long time, I thought that defined me." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "But I'm not here to dwell on the past. I'm here to talk about what came after. The struggles, yes, but also the growth. I learned that the things meant to break us can also make us stronger, if we let them." The audience was rapt, hanging on her every word. As Laura spoke about resilience and self-discovery, John felt a small measure of relief. Maybe she wasn't going to mention him directly. Maybe he was overthinking things. Then her tone shifted. "But not everyone gets that chance," Laura said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Sometimes the damage is too great." She paused, her fingers gripping the edge of the podium. "My brother Michael was one of those people. He was kind, intelligent, and sensitive, everything I admired. But he was also a target. The teasing, the ridicule, the constant feeling of being less than, it wore him down. And a year after we graduated, he took his own life." A collective gasp swept through the room. John's chest tightened. He knew where this was going, and, for the first time that evening, he wished he could disappear. "I don't blame one person," Laura continued, her gaze steady. "It was a culture, an environment that allowed bullying to thrive. But some of us had louder voices than others. Some of us set the tone." She didn't name him. She didn't have to. The room was deathly silent as Laura stepped down from the stage. John could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him, but he couldn't bring himself to meet them. His palms were damp, his mind racing with memories he had long buried. He remembered Michael, how quiet he was, how the jokes seemed to stick to him like glue. John hadn't thought much of it at the time. It was just harmless fun, wasn't it? Now, he wasn't so sure. Laura approached him, her expression calm but unreadable. "I told you," she said quietly, "I didn't come here for an apology. I came to tell the truth. What you do with it is up to you." And with that, she walked away, leaving John standing alone in the middle of the crowded room, the sound of his heartbeat drowning out everything else. As the reunion continues, John faces the judgment of his peers and the realization that his carefully constructed image may not withstand the weight of his past. The consequences of his actions, both then and now, begin to take shape. The music played on in the gymnasium, but the atmosphere was no longer light-hearted. Conversations grew quieter, more subdued, as small groups formed around the room. The weight of Laura's speech still hung in the air, her words echoing in every corner. John McAllister stood near the refreshment table, holding a glass of champagne he hadn't touched. For the first time in decades, he felt truly out of place. The confident billionaire who had entered with his head high now found himself under the silent scrutiny of his peers. "Hey, John," a voice said, cutting through his thoughts. He turned to see Greg Sanders, his former football teammate, standing with his hands shoved in his pockets. Greg's smile was forced, his eyes uncertain. "Greg," John replied, managing a nod. "Enjoying the reunion?" Greg hesitated, glancing around before speaking. "Yeah, it's been good to catch up with people. Though, I gotta admit, Laura's speech was intense." John's grip on the glass tightened. "It was unexpected," he said carefully. Greg nodded. "Yeah, unexpected. I didn't know about her brother. That's rough." He paused as if debating whether to continue. "But you know, I remember how things were back then. A lot of us could have been better." John gave a faint smile, trying to diffuse the moment. "High school was a different. In time, we were just kids." Greg didn't respond immediately, his eyes searching John's face. "Yeah, but some of those kids didn't make it through. Makes you think, doesn't it?" Before John could reply, Greg gave a quick nod and walked away, leaving him alone once again. As the evening progressed, John found himself avoiding eye contact, the once familiar faces of his classmates now sources of unease. Whispers followed him as he moved through the room, snippets of conversation drifting to his ears. "I had no idea about Michael Hayes." John was always the one egging people on. "Can you believe he invited her here after all that?" Each comment felt like a pinprick, the accumulated weight pressing down on him. He spotted Laura across the room, surrounded by a group of classmates who listened intently as she spoke. She was calm, composed, exuding the same quiet strength she had displayed all evening. John turned away, his stomach churning. He needed air. Outside the gymnasium, the cool night air hit him like a reprieve. He leaned against the building, loosening his tie and exhaling slowly. The hum of distant traffic was a welcome contrast to the tension inside. Pulling out his phone, he opened his email to distract himself. But as soon as the screen lit up, his heart sank. His assistant had forwarded him a link to a trending social media post. Former high school bully confronted at reunion by inspirational speaker. John's breath caught as he read the post. A classmate had filmed part of Laura's speech and uploaded it online. The video had already garnered thousands of views, with comments pouring in. "Wow, this is so powerful. People like John McAllister need to be held accountable. How can someone so successful have such a dark past?" John scrolled through the comments, his chest tightening with each one. His name, his reputation, everything he had worked so hard to build was now being dragged through the mud. The phone buzzed with a call from his assistant, Cynthia. He hesitated before answering. "Cynthia, I know why you're calling," he said, his voice weary. "Mr. McAllister, the video is gaining traction fast," she replied, her tone professional but concerned. "I've already received a couple of inquiries from reporters. They're asking for a comment." John pinched the bridge of his nose. "Tell them I have no comment at this time." "Understood," Cynthia said, "but that you might want to think about addressing this sooner rather than later. Silence isn't always the best option." "I'll handle it," John said curtly. Before hanging up, returning inside, John felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. As he re-entered the gym, he noticed how the atmosphere shifted when people saw him. Conversations paused, and the judgment in their eyes was unmistakable. "Mr. McAllister," a voice called out. He turned to see a younger woman approaching, a classmate he vaguely remembered as Sarah. She looked at him with a mix of curiosity and determination. "Can I ask you something?" she began. John nodded, though he braced himself for what was coming. "Do you think about it? The way you treated people back then? Or are you just here to show off how much money you've made? The question hit him harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to respond, but found no words. Sarah's expression softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. I'm not trying to attack you, but hearing Laura tonight, it made me think. People remember the way you made them feel, John. And some of those memories aren't easy to forget. She walked away, leaving John standing, alone in the middle of the room. As the night wore on, John found himself retreating further into his thoughts. The whispers, the stares, the memories, they all converged, forcing him to confront a reality he had spent years avoiding. When the event finally wound down, John lingered near the exit, watching as Laura bid goodbye to classmates. Her presence remained as poised as ever, a stark contrast to his growing discomfort. Before she left, she glanced his way, her expression unreadable. For a moment, he thought she might say something, but instead she simply gave a small nod before walking out the door. John stood there long after she was gone, the echoes of her speech replaying in his mind. The fallout from the reunion escalates. As John's past becomes a public spectacle, desperate to regain control, he begins searching for ways to make amends, but his initial attempts reveal just how far he still has to go. The news hadn't slowed. John McAllister sat in the back seat of his car, the leather seat cool against his back as he scrolled through headlines on his phone. Former bully turned billionaire faces backlash after reunion revelation. The article was accompanied by a still from the video of Laura's speech, her poised figure standing at the podium, every bit the composed speaker. The comments beneath were worse than the headlines. Each one seemed sharper than the last. It's disgusting how people like him rise to the top while others pay the price. No amount of money can make up for what he's done. Will he actually do anything, or is this just another story? Where the rich stay untouchable. John turned off his phone, tossing it onto the seat beside him with a sigh. He had spent the past few days in a fog, unable to shake the weight of Laura's words. For years, he had convinced himself that the past didn't matter, that everyone had moved on. But now, the consequences of his actions stared him in the face, undeniable and unrelenting. The car slowed to a stop in front of a modest, single-story house with a well-kept garden. John stared out the window, his pulse quickening. He had been here once before, many years ago, but the circumstances had been vastly different. "Sir, should I wait?" his driver asked, breaking the silence. John hesitated before nodding. "Yes, this won't take long." The door opened before John could knock. A woman stood there, her hair streaked with silver but neatly pulled back. She wore a simple cardigan over a floral blouse, and her eyes, though kind, were weary. "Mrs. Hayes," John began, his voice measured, "thank you for agreeing to see me." Laura's mother nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "I'll admit, I was surprised when you reached out." The house smelled faintly of lavender, the decor cozy and unpretentious. Mrs. Hayes gestured for John to sit on the couch while she settled into the armchair across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. John fidgeted with the cuff of his shirt, searching for the right words. "I wanted to come here," he started, "because I owe you an apology for what I did to Laura and for what happened to Michael." Mrs. Hayes's expression didn't change. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. John swallowed hard. "I was young, and I didn't think about how my actions affected others. I didn't know." "You didn't know," she interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "Or you didn't care." The question hung in the air, cutting deeper than he expected. John looked down at his hands, feeling the sting of her words. I didn't care enough," he admitted finally. Mrs. Hayes nodded slowly. "At least you're honest about that now." She leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on the mantel. It was Michael, smiling brightly in his cap and gown. "Michael was a sensitive boy," she said, her voice softer now. He felt things deeply. When people were kind to him, it lifted his whole world. But when they weren't— She paused, her lips pressing into a thin line. John followed her gaze, his chest tightening. He remembered Michael's quiet demeanor, the way he had tried to avoid attention, only to be singled out anyway. I'll never forget the day he came home from school and told me what they had written on his locker, Mrs. Hayes continued. He tried to laugh it off, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. That was the beginning of the end. Her voice wavered slightly, but she steadied herself. I'm not saying you're the only reason he's gone, Mr. McAllister. There were other factors, other struggles, but what you and those boys did made his world feel smaller, darker. John felt the weight of her words settle over him like a heavy blanket. I never meant for any of that to happen, he said quietly. Mrs. Hayes looked at him, her eyes sharp, despite their gentleness. Intentions don't erase consequences, John. What matters is what you do now. The room fell, silent, the ticking of a clock the only sound. John searched her face, expecting anger or resentment, but instead he saw something else, resolve. I don't hate you, she said finally. Carrying hate only prolongs the pain. But forgiveness isn't about absolving you. It's about freeing myself. That's why I've forgiven you, John. Not for your sake, but for mine. Her words hit him harder than he expected. Forgiveness wasn't a gift he could claim. It was a decision she had made for her own peace. What about Laura? He asked hesitantly. Mrs. Hayes smiled faintly. Laura has her own path. She's strong, stronger than you might realize. But you have your own work to do, Mr. McAllister. Forgiveness is one thing. Redemption is another. John stood to leave, his mind racing. As he reached the door, Mrs. Hayes spoke again. You can't change the past, she said, her tone firm but not unkind. But you can decide what kind of man you'll be moving forward. That choice is yours. Her words followed him as he stepped outside, the cool air hitting him like a wake-up call. John climbed back into the car, his driver glancing at him through the rearview mirror. Back to the office, sir? No, John said after a pause. Not yet. He stared out the window, his reflection merging with the passing cityscape. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about his reputation or the headlines. He was thinking about what kind of man he wanted to be, and how he could start proving it. Determined to take action, John seeks Laura's guidance, only to be met with a challenge that will test his sincerity and force him to confront his past head-on. John McAllister sat in the corner of a quiet coffee shop, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of black coffee. The usually comforting aroma of roasted beans did little to calm the knot tightening in his stomach. He glanced at the clock on the wall, the seconds ticking by with unnerving precision. Laura Hayes had agreed to meet him, but he wasn't entirely sure what to expect. When the door chimed and Laura walked in, John straightened in his seat. She spotted him immediately, her expression unreadable, and made her way to his table. She carried herself with the same composed confidence that had left him uneasy since the reunion. John, she said simply as she sat across from him. Laura, he replied, his tone hesitant but respectful. For a moment, neither spoke. John cleared, his throat breaking the silence. Thank you for coming. I know you didn't have to. You're right, Laura said, folding her hands on the table. I didn't. Her bluntness threw him off balance, but he pressed on. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the reunion, he began, about everything you said, about Michael, about what I did. Laura's gaze didn't waver. And? I want to make things right, John said, his voice firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. I know I can't change the past, but I need to do something to— To what? Laura interrupted. Ease your guilt? Repair your image? Sharpness of her words made him flinch. He opened his mouth to respond, but stopped himself. She wasn't wrong. Part of his motivation was tied to the public fallout and the headlines that had followed. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "But I want to try. I need to try." Laura leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You want to make things right," she repeated. "Fine. But I'm not going to tell you it's easy or that you'll be forgiven just because you want to. John nodded, bracing himself. "Here's what I want you to do," Laura said, leaning forward. "You're going to meet with the people you hurt, one by one. You're going to listen to their stories, not just what you did to them, but how it affected their lives. You won't make excuses. You won't defend yourself. You'll just listen." John's stomach dropped. The idea of facing his former classmates, of hearing their pain laid bare, made his chest tighten. But he nodded anyway. "And another thing," Laura continued, "you're not going to fix this with money or grand gestures. No donations, no scholarships with your name plastered on them. If you're serious about this, it has to be about the people, not your image." Her words struck a nerve, but John swallowed his pride. "I understand," he said quietly. Laura tilted her head, her gaze piercing. "Do you? Because I don't think you realize how hard this will be. Some people won't want to see you. Some will say things you're not ready to hear. And not everyone will forgive you." John exhaled slowly. "I'll do it anyway." For the first time, Laura's expression softened slightly, though her tone remained firm. "Good. But there's one more thing." John raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "You're going to document this process," Laura said. "Not for sympathy or to clear your name, but to show others what accountability looks like. People need to see the consequences of bullying, not just for the victims, but for those who cause it." John frowned. "You want me to make this public?" Laura nodded. "Yes. If you're serious about making amends, you need to own this. Hiding behind closed doors won't help anyone. Not the people you hurt, not you, and certainly not the kids out there who might be going through the same thing." The weight of her challenge settled over him like a heavy cloak. Publicizing his efforts would mean exposing his flaws, his mistakes, to an audience far beyond the people in this coffee shop. It would mean stripping away the carefully constructed image he had built over decades. "I'll do it," he said after a long pause. Laura studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Good. But remember, this isn't about redemption for you. It's about acknowledgement for them." The two sat in silence for a few moments, the hum of the coffee shop filling the void. Finally, Laura stood. "I'll help you get started," she said, surprising him. "I'll reach out to a few people I know who might be willing to talk to you. But after that, it's on you." John rose to his feet, offering a small, hesitant smile. "Thank you, Laura. I mean it." "Don't thank me yet," she replied, her tone carrying a mix of challenge and encouragement. "You've got a long way to go." As she walked away, John remained standing, her words replaying in his mind. He knew she was right. This wasn't going to be easy. But for the first time, he felt a flicker of determination, one that wasn't tied to his reputation or the headlines, but to something deeper. He was ready to start. John begins his journey of meeting his former classmates, facing their stories of pain and resilience. Each encounter challenges him in unexpected ways, forcing him to confront not only his past actions, but the man he has become. John McAllister stepped out of his car, his heart pounding as he approached the modest suburban home in front of him. The neatly trimmed lawn and blooming hydrangeas gave no hint of the emotional weight he carried into this visit. In his hand, he held a notebook, a suggestion from Laura to record each conversation, not for show, but to ensure he truly listened. He paused at the door, taking a deep breath before knocking. The sound echoed in his ears, louder than it should have been. A moment later, the door opened to reveal a middle-aged man with a wary expression. "Mark," John said, offering a tentative smile. Mark Simmons nodded. his face betraying no emotion. "John, come in." The two entered a small but comfortable living room. Family photos lined the walls, and a faint smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air. Mark gestured to the couch. "Take a seat." John sat, clutching the notebook tightly. Mark settled into an armchair across from him, his gaze steady. "So," Mark began, "you wanted to talk?" John nodded. "Yes, I wanted to apologize for how I treated you in high school. I know it's been a long time, but I've been thinking a lot about the things I did, the things I said, and I realize how wrong I was." Mark let out a short, humorless laugh. "Wrong, huh? That's one way to put it." John swallowed hard. "I know an apology doesn't change anything, but you're right," Mark interrupted, his voice sharp. "It doesn't." The air between them grew heavy. John felt the familiar urge to defend himself, to explain, but he bit it back. He had promised Laura he would listen. Mark leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Do you remember what you used to call me? Squeaky Simmons? Because my voice cracked when I was nervous, and you made sure I was nervous every single day." John winced. He had forgotten the nickname, or maybe he had chosen to forget it. "I hated walking into that school," Mark continued, his voice trembling slightly. "Every morning, I prayed you wouldn't notice me. But you always did. You made sure everyone did." John's stomach churned. "Mark, just let me finish," Mark said, holding up a hand. "I don't want your excuses. I don't need them." The words stung, but John nodded silently. Mark's voice softened, though the anger remained. "Do you know what it's like to be afraid all the time? To feel like no matter what you do, it'll never be enough? That's what you and your friends did to me. And yeah, it's been years, and I've moved on. I've got a family, a good job, a life I'm proud of. But there are still moments where I hear your voice in my head telling me I'm not good enough." John felt a lump form in his throat. He had prepared for anger, even rejection, but not this quiet, lingering pain. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mark studied him for a long moment. "I believe you," he said finally. "But sorry doesn't fix anything. You can't erase what you did." John nodded, his grip on the notebook tightening. "I know, but I want to do something. I don't know if it'll help, but I want to try." Mark's expression softened slightly. "Then stop making it about you. Stop trying to fix the past just to make yourself feel better. Do something that actually helps someone else." Here's the words hit John like a punch to the gut, but he knew Mark was right. As the day went on, John visited more people, each conversation a different challenge. One classmate, Anna, greeted him with cautious kindness. She shared how his taunts about her weight had haunted her for years, but she had eventually found solace in therapy and self-acceptance. Another, Peter, refused to see him, sending a curt message through his wife. "Tell him I've got nothing to say." The rejection stung, but John respected it. He scribbled Peter's name in his notebook with a note beside it. "Not ready to talk. Keep trying." Each encounter added another layer to his understanding of the harm he had caused. For years, he had minimized his actions, brushing them off as harmless teasing. Now those moments loomed large, each one a thread in the web of pain he had woven. As the sun began to set, John found himself in the small corner booth of a diner, meeting his final appointment of the day. The man sitting across from him, David, was quiet and reserved, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly as John spoke. "I'm sorry," John said, for what felt like the 100th time that day, "for the way I treated you, for everything I said and did." David nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the swirling liquid in his cup. "I appreciate that," he said finally, "and for what it's worth, I don't hate you. I've spent too much time hating myself to have room for anyone else." The words startled John. "Why would you hate yourself?" David looked up, his eyes weary. "Because I believed you. Every word, every insult, every stupid joke. I believed all of it. and it took me years to unlearn that. The silence that followed was deafening. As John drove home that night, his notebook lay open on the seat beside him, filled with names, notes, and raw emotion. The weight of the day settled over him, heavier than he had anticipated. Laura had been right. This wasn't about redemption or forgiveness. It was about facing the truth. And the truth was, his actions had left scars far deeper than he had imagined. But amidst the pain, there was a flicker of clarity. If his words and actions had caused so much harm, perhaps they could also be used to heal. He didn't know how. Yet, but for the first time, he felt a sense of purpose beyond himself. Inspired by his conversations, John begins exploring ways to create lasting change. He reaches out to Laura again, seeking her guidance on how to turn his guilt into meaningful action. The early morning sun streamed through the tall windows of John McAllister's office, casting a golden glow over the polished wood and glass furnishings. For once, the room's opulence did little to soothe him. John sat at his desk, a blank notebook open in front of him, its pristine pages a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions churning in his mind. Over the past few weeks, the weight of his past had settled firmly on his shoulders. The conversations with his former classmates had been both humbling and harrowing, each one peeling back another layer of the harm he had caused. He had expected anger and rejection, but he hadn't anticipated the depth of the scars or the resilience of those who bore them. He picked up his pen, scribbling a few tentative ideas. Awareness campaign, scholarships, support groups. Each suggestion felt insufficient, too shallow to address the pain he had witnessed. Frustrated, he dropped the pen and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," John called. Sitting up, the door opened to reveal Laura Hayes, her presence as calm and commanding as ever. She carried a slim leather folder under one arm and a faint smile on her lips. "You called," she said simply, stepping into the room. John rose to greet her, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Laura raised an eyebrow as she sat. "I'm not in the habit of ignoring calls for help. What's on your mind?" John hesitated, gathering his thoughts. "I've been thinking about what you said, that this can't just be about me trying to make amends. It has to be about something bigger, something that actually helps people." Laura nodded, her expression encouraging but measured. "Go on. I want to start something," he continued. "A program maybe to address bullying, not just awareness, but real support for people who've been affected by it. Counseling, resources, education, something that makes a difference." Laura leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "That's a good start," she said, "but you need to be clear about your goals. Are you trying to prevent bullying, help those who've already been hurt, change the way people think about it altogether?" John frowned, her questions hitting harder than he expected. "All of it," he said after a moment. "I don't want anyone else to go through what Michael did, or what the people I hurt went through." Laura studied him for a moment before nodding. "Then you'll need to think big. A single program won't solve this. You need a movement, something that changes the culture around bullying at its roots." John sat back, the enormity of the task settling over him. "How do we even start?" "We start small," Laura said, her voice steady. "With stories. People connect with real experiences, not statistics. You've already started listening to the people you hurt. Now it's time to amplify their voices. Create a platform where they can share their stories, educate others, and inspire change." As they began brainstorming, the energy in the room shifted. Laura's calm determination balanced John's cautious optimism, their ideas building on one another. They discussed creating workshops for schools, training programs for teachers, and online communities where victims and advocates could connect. "We'll need counselors," Laura said, jotting notes in her folder. And partnerships with schools and local organizations. This isn't something you can do alone. John nodded. I'll fund it, whatever it takes, but I want you to be involved. This is your expertise, not mine. Laura hesitated, her pen hovering over the page. I'll help, she said finally, but only if you're fully committed. This can't just be another check you write to make yourself feel better. You need to be hands-on. I will be, John promised. I want to see this through. As their discussion continued, a buzz from John's phone interrupted them. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing. It's an old friend, he muttered. Well, former friend. Laura tilted her head. Someone from high school? John nodded, answering the call. Hello? John, it's Brian. Brian Keller. The voice on the other end said. John's stomach tightened. He hadn't spoken to Brian in years, but the memories of their high school antics, often at the expense of others, were still vivid. Brian, John said cautiously, it's been a long time. Yeah, Brian replied, his voice tinged with unease. Listen, I saw the video of Laura's speech, and I've been thinking about it a lot. John glanced at Laura, who watched him intently. Go on, he said. I feel awful, Brian admitted, about everything we did back then. I don't know if you've been feeling the same way, but I can't stop thinking about how we treated people, especially Michael. John closed his eyes briefly, the guilt in Brian's voice striking a chord. I've been thinking about it too, he said, and I'm trying to do something about it. Laura and I are working on a program to address bullying, helping people who've been hurt, changing how it's handled. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Do you think there's any way I can help? Brian asked, his voice tentative. John glanced at Laura, who nodded subtly. Yeah, John said. There's a way, but it's not easy. After ending the call, John turned to Laura. Brian wants to help, he said. I didn't expect that, Laura smiled faintly. Bullying doesn't just hurt the victims, John. It leaves marks on everyone involved. Maybe this is his chance to start healing, too. John nodded, her words sinking in. The work ahead was daunting, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that the darkness of the past could give way to something brighter. John and Laura launched their initiative, gathering support from unexpected places. But as they take their first steps, they face criticism and resistance, testing their resolve and commitment to the cause. The small community hall buzzed with quiet anticipation as attendees filled the rows of folding chairs. A banner stretched across the stage read, Voices for Change, a community movement against bullying. The room, modest but welcoming, was a reflection of the grassroots beginnings of the initiative. John McAllister stood near the back of the hall, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored shirt. His usual confidence wavered as he watched the crowd grow. The faces were a mix of curiosity, support and skepticism. Some he recognized from his high school days, others were strangers, parents, teachers, and community leaders drawn by the promise of change. Laura Hayes stood by the stage, clipboard in hand, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to John's nerves. She caught his eye and gave a small nod, a silent reassurance that steadied him more than he cared to admit. It's a good turnout, she said as he approached. John nodded. Let's hope it's not just curiosity. As the event began, Laura took the stage first. Her presence was magnetic, commanding attention without demanding it. Good evening, she began, her voice clear and steady. Thank you for being here tonight. This initiative is not just about raising awareness, it's about action. It's about creating a culture where bullying is no longer dismissed as a normal part of growing up, but recognized for what it truly is, a destructive force that leaves lasting scars. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. Tonight, you'll hear from people who've experienced this firsthand. Their stories are not easy to share, but they're vital if we want to understand the depth of this issue and find solutions together. The room was silent, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. The first speaker was Anna, one of John's former classmates. She stepped onto the stage hesitantly, clutching a microphone. Her voice trembled as she began, but as she shared her story of overcoming the ridicule she endured in high school, her confidence grew. "I didn't think I'd ever be able to talk about this," Anna admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "But knowing that people are listening, that they care, makes a difference. If we can stop just one person from feeling the way I did, this is worth it." Applause filled the room as Anna stepped down, tears glistening in her eyes. John watched. From the side, his chest tightening. Each story reinforced the weight of what they were trying to do and the pain he had been complicit in causing. When it was John's turn to speak, the room fell eerily quiet. He climbed the stage, his usual air of authority replaced by something more subdued. "Thank you for being here," he began, his voice steady but laced with vulnerability. "I won't stand here and pretend that I've always been the man I am today. In fact, I'm here because of the man I used to be and the harm I caused." He paused, scanning the faces in the audience. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my actions and listening to the people I hurt. What I've learned is that apologies alone aren't enough. Words can't erase the pain, but they can start a conversation. And from that conversation we can create change." The audience was silent, their attention fixed on him. John exhaled, the vulnerability of the moment weighing heavily. "This initiative isn't about me. It's about the people who've been silenced, the ones who've carried the weight of bullying for years. It's about ensuring that no one else has to feel the way they did, or the way I do now, knowing the harm I caused." The final speaker of the evening was Laura. She stepped onto the stage with the same calm confidence she always carried, but there was an added weight to her presence. "I've been asked many times how I found the strength to forgive," she began, her voice steady. "The truth is, forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's not about letting someone off the hook or pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness is a choice, a hard one, that allows us to free ourselves from the chains of anger and resentment." Her gaze swept the room. "When I forgave John, it wasn't because I thought he deserved it. It was because I deserved peace. But forgiveness isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of something bigger: accountability, growth, and change." Her words hung in the air, the room utterly still. As the event drew to a close, Laura and John stood side by side on the stage. "This is just the start," John said, his voice stronger now. "We're not here to fix the past. We can't. But we can create a future where bullying is no longer tolerated, where people feel seen, heard, and valued." The audience erupted into applause, and for the first time in weeks, John felt a flicker of hope, not just for himself, but for the work they were beginning. As the crowd began to disperse, John caught sight of a small group lingering near the back. Among them was Sarah, one of the most skeptical voices he had encountered. She approached him slowly, her arms crossed. "You've got a lot of work to do," she said, her tone neutral. "I know," John replied, "but I'm ready for it." Sarah studied him for a moment before giving a small nod. "Good, because people are watching." As their initiative gains momentum, John and Laura face new challenges and triumphs. But the true impact of their work comes to light when a young attendee shares how the program has already changed his life. The grand hall buzzed with excitement and anticipation. Educators, parents, and advocates filled the space, their conversations blending with the hum of energy that always accompanied gatherings of this scale. John McAllister stood backstage, peeking out at the growing audience. The backdrop of the stage bore the initiative's logo, a ripple emanating from the center of a calm pond, symbolizing how small acts of change could spread far and wide. Laura Hayes stood beside him, clipboard in hand, calm and composed as always. "You're going to do fine," she said, sensing his unease. John let out a small laugh. "You sound more confident about that than I feel." Laura turned to him, her expression softening. "Because this isn't about you, John. It's about the people we're helping. Focus on them, and the rest will take care of itself." John nodded, her words grounding him. "Let's do this." The lights dimmed as Laura stepped onto the stage, her presence commanding yet approachable. The audience quickly quieted, their attention fixed on her. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "Thank you for joining us today. When John and I started Voices for Change, we didn't fully understand how far this journey would take us. What we did know was that the stories of those affected by bullying needed to be heard, and more importantly, they needed to lead to action." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Tonight, we want to share some of those stories with you. Stories of pain, resilience, and ultimately hope. Because when we truly listen, we begin to understand how small acts can create ripples that change lives." The lights dimmed further as a video began to play on the screen. The montage featured testimonials from participants in Voices for Change. A teacher described how the program had transformed her classroom culture, fostering kindness and accountability among her students. A parent shared how their child, once a victim of relentless bullying, had regained their confidence through the support groups. The final story featured a young boy sitting at his kitchen table. "My name is Ethan," he said, his voice steady, but soft. "Before this program I felt invisible. I didn't think anyone cared about me, and I didn't know how to make it stop. But this program helped me see that I wasn't alone. It gave me the tools to stand up for myself and believe that I mattered." The video ended, and the room erupted into applause. John stepped forward next, his hands steady on the podium. "Thank you for listening," he began, his voice low but firm. "For much of my life I thought success was measured by power, wealth, and influence. But what I've learned is that the only success that truly matters is the impact we have on others." He paused, letting the silence settle. "I was a part of the problem. I can't change that. But I can work to ensure that no one else has to carry the pain I caused. That's why we're here today. This initiative isn't about erasing the past. It's about building a better future. And that's something we can only do together." The audience remained silent, hanging on his every word. As John stepped back, Laura returned to the stage. "Before we close, we have one more story to share," she said. "Ethan, the boy from the video, is here with us tonight, and his story has an even deeper connection to this initiative." The audience stirred as Ethan walked onto the stage, clutching a small piece of paper. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was clear as he began. "Hi," he said, glancing nervously at the crowd. "I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who made this program possible. It's helped me in so many ways. But what I didn't know until recently is that it also helped my dad." John froze, a strange sense of familiarity washing over him. "My dad told me that when he was my age, he went through the same thing I did," Ethan continued. "He was bullied, and it hurt him a lot. He said it made him feel small and scared. And the person who hurt him the most was you." The room fell silent. John felt the breath leave his body as Ethan looked up at him. "But my dad also said," Ethan went on, his voice steadying, "that seeing what you're doing now, how you're trying to make things right, has helped him heal. And because of that, it's helped me too. So, thank you." The room erupted into applause, and John stood frozen, overwhelmed by the moment. Laura placed a steadying hand on his arm, her presence grounding him. When the applause finally died down, John stepped forward. "Ethan," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "thank you. Your courage inspires me, and your father's resilience humbles me. This is why we're here, not for absolution, but for hope. and for a future where no one has to carry this pain alone. The audience rose to their feet, a standing ovation carrying with it a sense of unity and hope. As the night ended, John and Laura stood by the stage, greeting attendees. Many came to shake their hands, to share their gratitude, or simply to offer a kind word. For the first time in years, John felt something shift inside him. It wasn't redemption, and it wasn't absolution. It was purpose. The ripple effect of their work was only beginning, and he was ready for what lay ahead. As we close this story, we want to hear from you. What part of John and Laura's journey resonated most with you? Have you ever experienced or witnessed a ripple effect of kindness and accountability in your own life? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories. If this story inspired you, consider joining our growing community by subscribing to our channel. Here we share more than just stories. We share lessons, inspiration, and the incredible ways people are making a difference in the world. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this journey with us. Your engagement and support mean the world, and together we can continue to amplify voices that need to be heard. Until next time, take care, and remember, even the smallest actions can create ripples of change. See you in the next video.